The moment he stood in front of the whole department and called my annual licensing visit a personal vacation, something inside me snapped. 18 years of protecting this company, erased with one smug sentence and a room full of people pretending not to stare. He thought humiliating me would make him look powerful. Instead, it revealed exactly how fragile he really was. Because while he mocked the trip, I knew the truth. That deadline he just killed was the only thing keeping our entire Southwest operation legal. If you want the full story, subscribe and tell me in the comments. Have you ever watched someone sabotage themselves? The first time I saw Camden Price, he looked like every corporate cliché rolled into one. Shiny suit, tighter haircut than necessary, and the kind of confident stride that always belongs to someone who has never actually done the job they're managing. He'd been with the company for barely 3 weeks, and yet he walked into that Monday meeting like he owned the building. I should have known the moment he placed his color-coded presentation on the screen that something was coming, but nothing prepared me for how openly he'd swing at me in front of everyone. I'd spent 18 years handling our Nevada licensing requirements, flying to Carson City every September, maintaining relationships with regulators who didn't tolerate excuses or missed deadlines. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a vacation. It was the foundation that kept our entire Southwest operation from getting shut down. But when Camden tapped his laser pointer against the slide, labeled cost-cutting opportunities, I felt the temperature in the room shift. He paused for effect, smirked, and then said it. And we won't be funding unnecessary trips to Nevada for handshakes and paperwork anymore. The words hung there, suspended, loud even though he wasn't shouting. A few people shifted in their chairs. One coughed. Another pretended to type something urgent. I sat perfectly still. My annual licensing trip was the only thing on that list that wasn't optional, but to him, it was a personal attack waiting to happen. He continued, pacing slowly, letting the insult settle. "We're modernizing," he added, as if modernization meant canceling a legal requirement. No more cross-state vacations on the company's dime. Vacation. That was the dagger. The room went quiet in that painful, suffocating way where everyone wants to disappear behind their laptops. I could feel their eyes flicking toward me, then away, then back again. Some of them had worked with me for over a decade. They knew exactly what that trip meant. They also knew Camden didn't. My heartbeat didn't spike. My breath didn't hitch. Instead, a cold calm spread through me, the kind that doesn't break you but steals you. I looked at him, this man who had been here less than 21 days, pretending to know my job better than I ever could. "Okay," said. One word. That was all I gave him. Not out of agreement, out of certainty. Because in that moment, watching him grin like he'd scored some brilliant political win, I realized precisely what was going to happen to him. He thought he was saving the company a few $1,000s. He thought cutting my trip made him look decisive and bold. He thought standing on that stage and humiliating me elevated him. What he didn't know, what no one else in that room understood yet, was that he had just quietly canceled the only safeguard keeping our Nevada operations legally alive. He had no idea what the renewal process required, no idea how brutal those deadlines were, no idea how quickly Nevada would pull the plug if something wasn't filed correctly. And I wasn't about to explain it to him, not after that performance. I sat back in my chair, folded my hands, and let him continue his little speech about efficiency and innovation. The fuse had been lit, the clock had started ticking, and Camden Price had no clue he was the one holding the match. After that meeting, Camden strutted out like he'd just solved corporate America's biggest problem instead of creating one. People trickled back to their desks, giving me those awkward half smiles people wear when they want to say, "I'm sorry," but are too afraid to get involved. I didn't need their sympathy. What I needed was clarity, and clarity came fast. Within an hour, Camden sent a message to the entire department, a neatly worded announcement about redistributing operational tasks to align with our modernization goals. I already knew what was coming even before I reached the bottom of the email. There it was, in bold. All Nevada licensing responsibilities will transition to Sierra moving forward. Please direct all relevant documents and communications to her. Sierra, his 24-year-old assistant. A girl who once walked into a meeting holding a pumpkin spice latte and asked if interstate compliance meant we had to file something with airports. She was sweet, smiley, eager to please. But handing her a state regulatory renewal process was like tossing her the controls of a plane mid-flight and telling her to land it, because how hard can it be? I didn't respond to the email. I didn't storm into Camden's office. I didn't fight him. I simply gathered every file, every spreadsheet, every contact list, every archived renewal timeline from the past 18 years, and sent it all in a single email to Sierra. Subject: Nevada certification required materials. I kept my tone painfully polite. I even added a line. Please confirm receipt and ensure deadline tracking is maintained through September 22nd. I CC'd Camden, of course. He wanted transparency. I gave him documentation. Sierra read it within minutes. I saw the little opened indicator, but she didn't reply. Not that day, not the next, not ever. That told me everything I needed to know. Camden wasn't just clueless, he was careless, and Sierra wasn't prepared. At first, he kept up the energy he'd brought into that meeting. Fresh posters went up around the office, words like velocity, transformation, future first. He redesigned our workflow chart and color-coded it like a motivational calendar. He started running efficiency huddles every morning at 8:15 sharp, where he'd throw around buzzwords like synergy, process streamlining, and operational pivoting. Every time he mentioned legacy habits, he glanced at me like I was an old photocopier he was trying to get budget approval to replace. Instead of correcting him, I let him talk. Let him rearrange the furniture, the workflows, the team dynamics, everything except the one thing that actually mattered. Meanwhile, I started the real work behind the scenes. I printed every email, saved every Slack message, took screenshots of every instance where Camden confirmed Sierra's ownership of the licensing process. I even recorded a few meetings when he said things like, "We need to phase out travel-heavy roles, and the old way is dead. Digital is our future." I had learned long ago that you don't win corporate battles by arguing. You win by documenting. While Camden was busy staging his little culture revolution, I quietly prepared for the consequences he didn't see coming. At the same time, Sierra seemed to drift further away from anything resembling responsibility. She started joining meetings late, hair still damp, apologizing because she had a content shoot that morning. Content. She ran a lifestyle TikTok about digital minimalism and desk organization. One day, she spent 15 minutes describing to a coworker how she wanted to build a brand partnership pipeline. None of it mattered, except for the fact that this was the person Camden had entrusted with the most time-sensitive compliance requirement we had, and he never followed up with her, not once. I watched him walk past her desk day after day, cheerful, oblivious, making jokes about how the company would finally be leaner without outdated processes slowing us down. I didn't intervene. I didn't remind anyone of the September 22nd deadline. That wasn't my job anymore. I had been removed, replaced, erased from the process. I simply circled the date on my personal calendar and added a small note. Bomb timer. And then, because I knew exactly how this would unfold, I added another reminder 1 week earlier. Do nothing. Let them own it. The fuse was already burning. All I had to do was step back and let the spark reach what Camden himself had soaked in gasoline. The strange thing about watching a disaster approach is how quiet everything feels when you're the only one who sees it. While Camden paraded around with his optimization slogans and Sierra filmed aesthetically pleasing shots of her color-coordinated desk for social media, I became the ghost in the room, silent, steady, taking notes no one asked me to take. September crept closer in a way that felt almost theatrical, like the universe itself was holding its breath. I didn't warn anyone. I didn't drop hints. The moment Camden stripped me of the authority to access the Nevada portal, he'd made it clear. This wasn't my responsibility anymore, and I wasn't going to chase a job I had been publicly demoted from. Instead, I leaned into the stillness. I kept my face neutral in meetings, doodling on the corner of my notepad while Camden talked about leaning into digital pathways and stepping into the frontier of automation. Sierra nodded along like she was listening to a TED Talk instead of instructions for dismantling a regulatory system she didn't understand. Nobody asked me questions, which was fine. People like me are used to holding the world together without applause, and we're just as capable of stepping back when asked. Around the second week of September, people in the comments section of our internal portal, anonymous of course, started leaving little jokes about management cutting corners without knowing which corners mattered. I read them and couldn't help smirking. They didn't realize how close they were to the truth. One afternoon, while stirring my tea, a coworker passed by and whispered, "You doing okay?" He asked it the way someone does when they think you've been replaced by a younger model. I nodded. Let him think I was being phased out. Let all of them think that. It made what was coming feel even sharper. Meanwhile, Sierra had fully embraced her new identity as Operations Support Lead, a title Camden invented to make her sound like more than a content creator who had accidentally wandered into compliance. She booked a 4-day digital detox retreat in the Nevada desert right before the deadline to realign my energy, she told Camden, who nodded proudly like he'd mentored her into a new era of professional enlightenment. I didn't say a word, not when she mentioned it, not when she posted photos of her feet in the sand with captions about grounding, not when she set her Slack status to palm trees. Instead, I backed up more files. I created an offline archive of every communication trail. The email she ignored, the instructions she never acknowledged, the briefing I sent with attachments more detailed than some legal guides. I stored one copy on a hard drive at home and another on a USB hidden inside my desk drawer. This wasn't revenge. This was insurance, the same way people keep a fire extinguisher under the sink. If they ever tried to push the blame downhill, I had the entire map that led straight back to Camden's modernization. The countdown hit 1 week. I didn't feel dread or guilt, I felt clarity. Growing up, I was the kid who let the bully talk until he tripped over his own ego. Adults don't change much. Camden wanted a streamlined future. I was about to let him experience exactly what that meant when the past he dismissed finally stopped holding the company together. The email arrived at 3:14 a.m. Nevada time, stamped with the kind of bureaucratic efficiency that never cares who's asleep or who's prepared. I saw it the moment I woke up, blinking at the subject line glowing on my phone. Urgent notice. License renewal action required by September 22nd. I didn't need to open it to know what was inside. After nearly 2 decades of dealing with Nevada regulators, I could practically recite their warnings by heart. Direct, cold, unemotional. They didn't nag or nudge. They notified once, then they enforced. Sierra was the primary recipient. I was CC'd almost like a ghost of the past, requested out of habit by a legacy system that still remembered I existed, even if the new management didn't. I lay there for a few seconds staring at the screen, absorbing what it meant. The deadline was 5 days away. Sierra was off the grid, busy reconnecting with her inner stillness in the desert. Camden hadn't checked a single compliance-related communication in weeks. The company's entire legal standing in Nevada depended on 2 people who had no business being near a regulatory calendar. And me? I was just a spectator now, a witness with no authority and no obligation to protect a man who had humiliated me for sport. My mouse hovered over the forward button. For a split second, instinct almost kicked in. The instinct to fix, to warn, to protect the company I had given 18 years of quiet, loyal work. But then I remembered that moment in the meeting room. Camden's smirk, his smug tone, the way he dismissed my responsibilities as a vacation, the way the room fell silent, not out of respect but embarrassment. I remembered the email he wrote afterward, stripping me of all portal access, declaring Sierra solely responsible. And just like that, the instinct dissolved. I closed the message. Not deleted, not forwarded, just closed. If they wanted modernization, they were about to get a master class in what happens when experience is replaced by slogans. At the office, I kept my face neutral as always. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. People talked about weekend plans and budget revisions, unaware that the ground beneath them was already cracking. At noon, I opened my private archive folder, Final Nevada Backup, and started adding the newest documents. The urgent notice, the timestamp, the CC trail. Evidence didn't need passion. Evidence didn't need revenge. Evidence just needed to exist, quietly, patiently. The next day came and went with no movement from Sierra. Camden hosted another efficiency talk in the break room, pacing in front of a poster that said, "Build smarter, not harder." He talked about digital transformations, eliminating outdated methods, freeing up resources. No one asked about licensing. No one asked about Carson City. They didn't know better, so they didn't worry. That's the thing about hidden responsibilities. No one sees the danger until the fallout hits them personally. On September 22nd, the deadline passed at 11:59 p.m. Nevada time. There were no fireworks, no alarms, no sudden lights dimming, just silence, a quiet, irreversible expiration. Nevada doesn't send a second notice. They don't grant grace periods. They simply deactivate. And when they deactivate, the ripple is merciless. The next morning, I walked into the office with a fresh cup of tea, calm as if this were any other Friday. It wasn't. I knew exactly what was coming next. Not because I hoped for it, but because I had lived long enough in this world to understand one rule better than any manager ever could. When someone dismantles a system they don't understand, the collapse is not a question of if, only when. And for Camden, when had just begun. The first sign didn't look like a catastrophe. It was a simple Slack message at 7:42 a.m., dropped into the operations channel by someone in Reno. "Is anyone else locked out of the Nevada portal? Says our certification number is invalid." I stared at the message while the steam curled from my tea. Invalid. That was Nevada's version of a guillotine. Before anyone could process it, another message appeared, this time from a supervisor in our Phoenix hub. "We've got 2 shipments on hold. State inspectors flagged our documentation as expired. This can't be right." The words poured in faster than Camden could finish his morning protein shake. Denver chimed in next, then Salt Lake City, each message sounding more frantic than the last. Camden finally responded, typing with the frantic energy of a man who believed every problem could be solved with the right buzzword. "Probably a back-end sync issue. It is looking into it. Clear cache, refresh, and check again." Clear cache. If the situation hadn't been so serious, I might have laughed. Nevada wasn't having a technical hiccup. Nevada had shut the doors, turned off the lights, and locked our entire Southwest operation out of its own legal identity. And all because one man wanted to prove he was smarter than decades of proven procedure. I watched him pace across the floor, phone pressed to his ear, voice forced calm but pitched too high. "No, I'm sure it's an integration issue," he insisted to someone. "There's no world where our certification just vanished." Oh, but there was, and he had created it. Shipments were now stuck at the Reno distribution center, blocked from release. Refrigerated freight, products with a 12-day shelf life, sat in expensive cold storage while hourly fees ticked upward like a countdown. Clients began sending in complaints. Help desk tickets flooded our system. Contracts that relied on continuous operation started sending automated legal notices. The company's Southwest infrastructure wasn't bending under pressure. It was collapsing. People started whispering near my desk, their voices lowered, their glances sharper. "This doesn't feel like IT," one said. "What happens if we can't fulfill by end of week?" Another murmured. I kept sipping my tea, letting the chaos unfold around me like a storm I'd already prepared for. I didn't intervene. Not when Reno's manager emailed Camden directly, not when Phoenix escalated to the COO, not when a frantic junior analyst asked if I had any idea what's going on with Nevada. I shrugged. It's not my project anymore. And that was the truth. Finally, at 11:06 a.m., a new message appeared in my inbox. From Sierra, fresh off her desert retreat. The subject line was simply, "Need help." She wrote, "Hey Eliza, hope you're doing well. Camden wants to know if you can help with the licensing issue. Let us know what you need. Thank you." Her tone was airy, polite, and absolutely unaware of the severity of what she had ignored. Instead of responding with advice, warnings, or anger, I did something much simpler. I found Camden's original delegation email, the one declaring Sierra fully responsible, the one he wrote with such confidence after that humiliating meeting. I forwarded it to both of them. No explanation, no commentary, no passive-aggressive remark. Just his own words, returned to him at the perfect moment. Less than a minute later, I heard his office door slam shut. Not the gentle kind of closing a person makes when thinking. The sharp, rattling kind someone makes when they realize the ground beneath them has disappeared. He spent the next hour dragging IT into emergency calls, insisting they trace the system error. 8, bless their patience, looped in legal. Legal looped in the Nevada Business Compliance Division. And that was the moment the truth landed like a brick through glass. Nevada responded with a single sentence. Your certification expired on September 22nd and has been deactivated. There it was, the final confirmation. No room to argue, no one else to blame. Silence spread across the floor as the message reached the leadership team. People stared at their screens, some in disbelief, others in growing dread. Camden didn't stare. He slumped back into his chair like he'd been punched square in the chest. For the first time since he arrived, he wasn't talking about optimization or efficiency. He wasn't talking at all. And in that heavy silence, I felt the shift, the precise moment when incompetence finally met consequence. By the time the summons arrived in my inbox, the building felt like it was holding its breath. People whispered in corners, executives paced hallways with stiff shoulders, and Camden looked like he hadn't slept in 48 hours. A meeting invitation from the CEO, mandatory, immediate, no agenda listed, never meant anything good. I walked into the boardroom with the same quiet calm I'd carried since the day Camden stripped me of access. The long mahogany table was already full. The CFO sat rigid, lips pressed tight. The COO tapped a pen so hard it left tiny dents in her notebook. And at the head of the table stood the CEO, holding a thick envelope like it weighed more than paper ever should. He didn't greet anyone. He didn't ease into the meeting. He slapped the envelope down onto the table, the thud echoing across the room. This, he said, arrived at my home this morning via courier. A courier, not email, not a polite heads up, a hand-delivered penalty notice from the Nevada Business Compliance Division. Every eye in the room locked on him. The CEO pulled out an official letter, its ink sharp and merciless. Our Nevada certification expired 5 days ago, he said, and as of 12:01 a.m. this morning, we owe $62,500 in penalties, non-negotiable, and that number is climbing. Silence clung to the room like static. He didn't give anyone time to process it before spreading out printed spreadsheets across the table. Southwest Logistics frozen, 2 refrigerated shipments nearing spoilage, 3 clients threatening breach of contract action, and our Reno distribution center has filed a report declaring us non-operational. His gaze narrowed. Who, he said slowly, was responsible for the renewal this year? He didn't ask it softly. It wasn't a question. It was a loaded gun placed on the table. Camden shifted in his chair, color draining from his face. We, transitioned the process, he stammered. Modernization efforts, delegation, it was assigned to whom? The CEO repeated, sharp enough to cut the air. To Sierra, Camden admitted, voice cracking. Sierra shrank into her seat, cheeks flushing. But, Camden hurried on, we were assured the process was documented. The responsibilities were aligned with our new operational structure. Show me, the CEO demanded. Camden blinked. Show me the documentation proving you executed this transition properly. He had nothing, not a single paper, not a single date, not a single receipt. And that is when I slid my laptop forward, calm and deliberate. I turned the screen toward the center of the table, revealing a neatly organized timeline, dates, emails, attachments, the original delegation memo, everything in chronological order. Although I said nothing, the message was unmistakable. This is what real documentation looks like. The COO leaned in first, eyes widening, then the general counsel, then the CEO himself. He pointed to one entry. This email, he said, voice tight. From March, you wrote this? Camden nodded miserably. You removed senior compliance from the renewal process, the CEO said. You assigned a state-critical responsibility to an assistant with no training. You didn't follow up, you didn't check deadlines, and you eliminated the annual trip that secured our regulatory standing. He paused. Did you even read the renewal? Schedule. Camden didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence filled in the truth. The general counsel leaned over and whispered something to the CEO, something short, something final. The CEO straightened. Leave your badge with reception, he said quietly but firmly, effective immediately. Camden's breath hitched. Sir, I can fix. You've done enough, the CEO cut in. Camden didn't move at first, like he was waiting for someone to save him, but no one did. Eventually he stood, slow, defeated, and walked out without a word. The door clicked shut behind him, and just like that, the man who mocked my work in front of the entire department was gone, undone by the very thing he believed he could ignore. When the door shut behind Camden, the room didn't relax. If anything, the tension thickened, like everyone was waiting for the next blow. The CEO exhaled, long and exhausted, before turning his attention to me. For months, I'd been invisible to him, just another long-tenured employee keeping things steady in the background. Now he looked at me like I was the last functioning pillar holding up a collapsing bridge. Eliza, he said, voice softer now, we need to talk privately. The others filed out quietly, some offering me small nods, the kind people give when they finally understand what you've been carrying all along. I followed the CEO into his office. The blinds were half drawn, the afternoon sun cutting through in narrow slices, lighting up dust floating between us. He didn't sit right away. He paced once, twice, then turned toward me with a look that landed somewhere between guilt and desperation. I won't sugarcoat this, he said. We're in a mess, a serious one, and you're the only person who can get us out of it. He opened a folder on his desk and slid it toward me. Inside were numbers, big ones, a compensation adjustment, a reinstatement of my authority, stock incentives, and a promotion that would have made my younger self dizzy. 18 years of expertise, suddenly valued again, but value offered too late still feels like disrespect. We want you back in control, he said. You know this process better than anyone. You built our Nevada compliance from the ground up. Help us fix this. I studied the papers, not because I needed to read them, I already knew my answer, but because I wanted to feel the weight of this moment. I thought about the night I stayed up on the phone with a regulator during a wildfire evacuation. I thought about the times I caught errors no one thanked me for. I thought about the humiliation, the dismissal, the careless way Camden erased 2 decades of my work with a single smirk. And then I thought about the peace I had felt watching the truth surface naturally. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope, crisp, neatly folded, already notarized. I placed it gently on top of the CEO's offer. His eyes widened, he understood, before he opened it. Eliza, he started, but there wasn't anything left for him to say. You needed me months ago, I said quietly, but you only noticed after everything fell apart. He swallowed hard, that was his answer. I stood, smoothing the crease in my jacket. At the doorway, I paused and turned back to him. Enjoy the silence and revenue, I said, not loud, not cruel, just honest. The truth doesn't have to shout to be heard. Back at my desk, I packed the only things that mattered, my favorite mug, the 2 USB drives, a small notebook with years of dates, reminders, and notes I no longer needed. A few coworkers hovered near the hallway, offering gentle smiles, the kind that said they finally understood the cost of being taken for granted. I walked out of the building without ceremony, without a farewell email or forced hugs, just the echo of my heels clicking across tile as the company behind me scrambled to repair what I had once held together effortlessly. At the airport, I didn't book a budget seat. I booked first class. Not to Carson City this time, to Seattle. My choice, my trip, my freedom. As the plane lifted through the clouds, champagne cooling in my hand, I let the weight of the past 18 years slide off me, leaving only clarity behind. Sometimes the cleanest revenge is simply letting people feel the consequences of pushing away the one person who kept everything standing. There's something strange about staying silent while people underestimate you. Strange, but powerful. I spent years believing that hard work spoke for itself, that loyalty would be recognized, that competence was a safety net. But the truth is, in today's world, people don't always see the quiet work that keeps everything standing. Some will dismiss it, some will mock it, some will try to replace it with ambition and buzzwords. And sometimes, the only way they learn is by facing the consequences of their own choices. My story isn't about burning everything down. It's about stepping back and letting the truth rise on its own. It taught me that revenge doesn't always need flames or fury. Sometimes it's just refusing to carry the weight for someone who dropped it on purpose. Sometimes forgiveness is self-liberation, but sometimes silence is the sharpest knife. And there is a balance in that, a boundary every one of us has the right to draw. If someone tries to erase you, you don't have to fight to stay visible. You can let your absence do the talking. For anyone living through something similar today, being overlooked, disrespected, or pushed aside, remember this. Your value isn't determined by who recognizes it. It's determined by the work, the integrity, and the history you've built. If they don't appreciate it, someone else will. And if no one does, you still know who you are. How to get started today. Document everything, your work, your wins, your contributions. Silence is powerful, but evidence is louder. Set boundaries. You're allowed to walk away from places that stop deserving you. Invest in yourself, your skills, your peace, your future. Don't rush revenge. Let consequence do the heavy lifting. If this story resonated with you, tell me your experiences in the comments. Share this with someone who needs it and subscribe for more stories just like this.